Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another video with Swagahas. And in this video, we got to ask ourselves a question. Of all the equity that you've lost out on in your comic book collection, have you lost 5 figures worth? Have you lost $69,000 worth of equity in comic books? Specifically, 5 comic books, no less? Well, in this video, we need to talk about this Reddit post that I saw on comic book collecting and talk about how this one particular individual, kudos to them, shared their top 5 worst purchases of the comic book boom of 2021. So in this video, I want to talk about these 5 purchases, maybe talk a little bit about the idea of FOMO, but also maybe more importantly, serve this person some copium. Where are we going from here? Talk about how, in this current market, if you made some bad purchases, all you're going to have to do is HODL, bunker down. And at the end of the day, nobody really knows anything. But before I get into it, if you guys could drop me a like or a comment or subscribe if you're enjoying the content, help support the channel, doing those things, I would appreciate it. But let us get into this video here today. Now, I just thought that this was a really interesting post. I don't know if you guys happen to browse comic book collecting on Reddit. I happen to do so, and I really enjoy the site, hearing people's different stories of books they picked up or things like that. And I really thought that this post was very interesting. Somebody sharing their 5 worst purchases of 2021. And, kudos to them. They were being extremely transparent, and they made some big book purchases in the height of the market. And, they're definitely feeling it right now. So let's kind of go through this post. And I want to talk a little bit about each book. Of course, I'm on r/comic book collecting. And I recommend you guys check out this subreddit. They have some pretty cool posts. And the user we're going to talk about here is this Bronk SX3 guy. And I'm not here to meme on them. Actually, I just want to talk about their experience. And hell, based on what they're purchasing, obviously they're doing pretty well in life regardless. So, there's nothing to kind of make fun of them for. But here are the 5 books that they bought in the height of 2021. And let's kind of go through them. So they say that they bought a giant size X-Men #1 in a 9.8 grade white pages. Absolutely beautiful book. They also picked up this Avengers #196, another 9.8 with white pages. They picked up a special Marvel edition 15, 9.8 off-white to white pages. Then they also picked up right here this Amazing Spider-Man #129, 9.8 with white pages. So definitely hitting those very top tier Bronze Age books. And the last one that they talked about was this one right here, the Star Wars: The Clone Wars #1, the special edition, the 9.8 white pages right here, which is the first appearance of Ahsoka Tano. And I kind of want to scroll down to their post and talk specifically about their experience with each of the books. And let's kind of, discuss this here one by one. So again, this person says they lost a whopping $69,000. Of course, this is all unrealized losses, right? You only lose if you sell. We've talked about that here on the channel before, but let's go through these books. Avengers #196, the first appearance of Taskmaster. They said that they were able to find a book for $2,700 all in. This was a book, if we remember, during the Black Widow film that was peaking at around the $3,000 mark. You can see how much this book had been trending up actually over the course of the last couple of years, because everyone kind of knew and anticipated that Taskmaster was coming to the Black Widow film. Obviously hit the heights in September of 2021. And then ever since then, it had the huge drop off, the fire sale, the dump to where the book is now, kind of selling around that $1,000 range. I mean, you see different prices, on any given day, but here's $899, here's $750, here's a $1,400 fixed price. So, this is a book that floats in that $1,000 price point. And Taskmaster is a character, a lot of people love this character. A lot of people were disappointed based on the version that was executed in the Black Widow film. I can understand those criticisms, but it doesn't take anything away from the fact that, Tony Masters is still an awesome character. This is still an awesome George Perez book. Now, I don't think it's impossible for this book to ever reach some of those peak prices again, but it's going to be very difficult. I mean, we do know that the Taskmaster is going to come back, so you're at least going to have some kind of pop cultural, relevance to this book. But again, you're battling with this hurdle of it being not the exact version of the character we know in the comic books. So that is going to make it a challenge. And I do think that of the 5 books that we're going to talk about today, this is probably the one that is least likely to realize some of those peak prices, which I think is ultimately good because this was the cheapest book that he lost out on. So, as far as like actual dollar amount, I think that, his loss is going to be mitigated on this one. Avengers #196 actually ranks a 13 on the swag scale, which puts it into that speculative category. This book was always going to be speculative for a book that was going to take you to the moon. I mean, when you're buying something like this, when you're buying a character like this, you're going to need a lot of really successful things to happen for you to go to the moon with the particular values of this thing, right? Like, you're going to need the character to come out in the movie, be the absolute best version of the character. Everyone is obsessed with Taskmaster. They become the next Deadpool. This character becomes a pop cultural icon. So you need a lot of things to happen for this book to kind of pull itself out of the speculative category. The next book we got to talk about that he lost out on is the Star Wars Clone Wars Special Edition. Peak prices for this thing were going at the $16,000 range. He ended up buying it for $11,000. And now where the book sits, you can see that at the 9.8 level, this is a book that sells under that $8,000 range. And this is a very interesting one to talk about. Of course, first appearance of Ahsoka Tano. Now, we are getting the Ahsoka Tano show later on this year. And so we don't really know what the potential of a book like this is. I mean, I do think that, where the prices were going for in 2021, there was just, a lot of speculation, a lot of froth kind of baked into those prices. So it's going to be hard for this book to hit some of those values again. But if we're thinking about this being a really special book and we're thinking about the census, I mean, I actually like that this is a really low census. This is a hard book to find. And Ahsoka has a lot of potential as being, maybe one of the faces of the Star Wars franchise for many years to come. I mean, when we think about some of these modern grails, here at the 9.8 grade, there's only 115. That is less than, say, the Miles Morales Djurjevic variant. I'm not saying this book should or could be as valuable as the Djurjevic one, but, thinking about the census, thinking about this character, thinking about how the peak prices for this thing were around the $16,000 range, I mean, it could actually happen that we get back to those numbers. I mean, maybe in a few years' time, if things go well with Star Wars, if things turn the corner, this could be a very, very special book for a lot of collectors. Of course, this book right here rates a 16 to 17 on the swag scale, which puts it in the some risk to low risk category. Still sort of uncertain what the future holds for this one, but still a very, very intriguing kind of speculation for a book regardless. This next book right here I thought was really interesting. Giant Size X-Men #1. Peak prices for this thing were hitting at that $72,000 range. I mean, this was absolutely crazy what this thing was selling for. This guy says he got his copy for $52,000, and where the book kind of currently sells is right around that, anywhere from $33,000 to $40,000 range. You can see right here, another book, huge speculation jumping up to $78,000. He bought it kind of probably around this time in 2022, and then kind of where we are today, there's definitely a bigger discount for this book. In fact, I'm not actually so sure that this book doesn't continue to correct a little bit more. If we're looking at the 2020 prices for this thing, around that $20,000 range, and now it's selling at the 33, I mean, it is possible that this book could dip back down to that $28,000, $25,000 price point. But at the end of the day, this is Giant Size X-Men #1. I mean, you're talking about the first appearance of Storm, first Colossus, first Nightcrawler, and we haven't really seen this version of the team in the MCU yet. This book ranks a 18 to 17 on the swag scale, so it could go anywhere from the low risk to certified key category. Again, the census is going to be the thing that holds this thing down. But when we're talking about that 9.8 grade level, this is a similar census amount to like some of the other books like Hulk 181 or even the Djurjevic variant when we're talking about Miles Morales. I mean, if Miles Morales can hold a floor price of the $40,000, $45,000 range, if Hulk 181 can go up to $134,000 and still be at that $70,000 mark. Again, I realize more people would like Hulk 181 than Giant Size X-Men 1. I think that is the case, right? We're talking about first appearance of Wolverine versus, say, first appearance of Storm here. I do think that it is possible that this book gets back up to those levels. I mean, I would actually say that this is probably more likely that this book would go up to those levels than Taskmaster would go up to, back around the $3,000 price point. So I do think that there is some copium with this particular book. I do think that a lot of collectors would still love to have that book in their collection. And similar to this one too, another book that I think a lot of people would love to have in their collection, he also bought an Amazing Spider-Man 129. It peaked at $57,000. He said that he bought it for $46,000. And based on where prices are now, it's now kind of selling again around the $28,000 range, at least at the 9.8 level. You see 166 9.8s on the census and, a pretty decent correction. But I kind of feel like this book has, corrected to where it should be corrected to. Again, in December of 2020, it was around that $15,000 range. Now it's kind of at the $25,000 range. So I think at least for this particular book, the bleeding has stopped. I think that ASM 129 is always going to be popular. A lot of people want this thing. And I do feel like we're at the point with The Punisher where, his cultural significance is at the lowest it's probably been in a long, long time. I mean, I think we all forget that Punisher is still one of the biggest Marvel characters. You have so many historic comic book collectors that are obsessed with this book. Like, everybody wants Punisher in their collection, which is why this book rates an 18 on the swag scale for me. I mean, if you want to be a little bit more harsh, you could drop it down to the 17 level, but I think that this is a very strong 18 certified key. And I actually do think that if we get Jon Bernthal doing the Punisher thing, in the MCU, and even outside of all the MCU, by the time we get to like 2025 and 2026, when we start, the new economic bull run, right, if we're out of the recession and things like that, I actually do think that this is a book that can certainly flirt with some of those prices that it was hitting in 2021, around that $40,000, $50,000 range. So I think that this person's going to do okay. This last one is probably the second, most sketchy one I would say that this person has to bounce back from. They bought a special Marvel Edition 15, a 9.8 with off-white to white pages, a book that peaked at the $18,000 range. They say that they got their book for around the $17,000 range. And you can see that now this is a book that sells at the $5,000 range. And again, like Taskmaster, this was another one that was just probably way too speculative of a character. I mean, again, I know a lot of people like the Shang-Chi movie. I personally did not like the film, but it's clear we're going to be getting more of this character. So if they're able to do, some successful things with him, in the coming, say, Avengers films and maybe his sequel, et cetera, you can start to build this character's popularity and the demand for this character. Again, this book rates a 15 to 16 on the swag scale, definitely much more in the kind of, some risk to speculative category for me because of the fact that, Shang-Chi, just historically speaking, has not been a book that a lot of people wanted to collect and is not necessarily a character that I would even put in the top 60 yet of popularity, even with his movie. I still don't think Shang-Chi, generally speaking, is that popular of a character. I think that he could be, but again, this is why he is in the speculative category. Now, that being said, where this book is selling for right now, at the $5,000 range, I mean, this feels like a great buy because, it's an all-black cover, only 119, CGC 9.8s on the census. This is a book that, I would almost compare to like a Luke Cage Hero for Hire #1 or an Iron Fist first appearance, Marvel Special Edition 15. In all likelihood, it's going to be tough for this book to sort of reach that kind of peak price point that it was hitting for in 2021. But, this is kind of where, I sort of want to wrap up the video and talk about, the main ideas behind this. And that's this idea of, you're just going to have to hold, right? You're just going to have to wait and hold. Again, if you're somebody out there who made some bad purchases, and you don't have that equitable position, as long as you bought a book that has some potential, right? Like what are the factors that are going to increase the demand for your particular copy, like later on in the future? Pop culture has a lot to do with that. I mean, these are pop culture collectibles. And if you have, movies generating demand, then generally speaking, you have a chance for them to go up in value. But again, the movies can also do the inverse thing. They can actually hurt certain books. They can hurt the brands of certain characters. So you have to balance that out with the historical demand factor, which is why books like Giant Size X-Men #1 or The Punisher or things like that, those are always going to have fans no matter how bad the movies end up being, right? There's always going to be people that want them. Whereas the Shang-Chi one and the Taskmaster one, they're in more of that speculative category simply due to the fact that, they could swing really high if, they knock it out of the park with some movie, or they could swing really low, if, the movie is not good and you hurt the, appearance of the character, that can really hurt the values of the comic book. So again, to this person, shout out to them for being really transparent with their collection. I thought that this was a really good Reddit post, and, they're just going to have to hold. And luckily for them, I do think that I'd say 4 out of 5 of those books, with the exception of Taskmaster, have a decent chance to maybe hit some of those prices, later on when we get to, better economic times. You never really know. But we also got to remember that 2021 was a crazy time. And, it's really funny. I see all the comments. I see what people write, especially when I do my index videos. And a lot of people, they come out, they're armchair quarterbacking. They're like, oh, Swaggle House, you don't know. I knew in 2021, all of these comic books were totally inflated. I knew that everything was going to crash. And it's like, I always think to myself, if you knew that that was going to happen, why didn't you sell all your comic books? You could have bought them all back now and had twice the equity. But, of course, they never actually do that. And I realize, people don't want to sell their comic books because they're emotionally attached to them. But, you feel like all these people who are just like armchair quarterbacking or even they project right now, oh man, the market is so much, it's going to go so much lower. We're going back to 2018 prices. It's like, if you actually think that is the case, you should be selling all of your books right now because you can buy them all back later. But again, they're not going to do that because the reality is nobody knows anything. I mean, 2021 was a crazy time. Now we're in 2023. This is also a crazy time. And even with all the data and the speculation and the tools and looking at charts and lines and graphs and things like that, we think we can make an educated guess of where things are going. But at the end of the day, who really knows? We could go to zero next month. We could go to the moon next month. Maybe comic books are going to be dead. Maybe nobody likes to collect them anymore. Or maybe we're all going to the moon, in 4 years' time, because in the history of comic books, generally speaking, the good ones have performed pretty well. But that is all I have for this video. That was me just talking about this person's Reddit post. I thought it was really interesting. Let me know what you guys think. What do you guys think this person should do? Have you guys lost equity on some of your comic books? What are your horror stories? Anyways, that's all I got. Drop me a like, comment, subscribe if you're enjoying the content, and I'll see you in the next video.